Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and we're coming to you from the heart of London's Canary Wharf. And joining me today to answer your questions are Ben Stroud, co-founder of Grange London, West London estate agents. Welcome.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good to see you back, Ben. And joining Ben is another Ben Mackey, founder of the Party Wall Collective. Welcome to you, Ben.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good to see you back too. Now, Ben, your first question is this. Despite interest rate cuts over the last year, apart from a surge when stamp duty levels changed earlier in the year, the market remains, shall we say, difficult. Are there any green shoots, or is the outlook for the second half of the year fairly subdued? Here's your crystal ball job now.
Yeah. Look, I think I'm quite a positive person, glass half full. I would say for the second half of the year, probably still quite subdued on balance. I think UK PLC is in a funny place at the moment. So record levels of government debt, underfunded public services, police, NHS. And it is, for the most part, still quite hard to get access to mortgage lending. Rates are coming down on the positive side, but it's not always easy to get the best rates or to save for the deposit you need to access that mortgage finance. And also there's a lot of uncertainty on the global stage, geopolitical concerns. So I think sentiment in general is quite poor. I'm a London agent. That's where I've always been all of my life, lived and worked. And London is a mirror on the world in terms of international capital flows. So a lot of international buyers have been hit even harder than local buyers. Some would say that's fair. I think it's probably gone a little bit too far in terms of stamp duty, up to 19% if you're based abroad and you're buying a second home in London. Changes to the non-dom tax regime. And I think just a general perception from international buyers, at least, that London is less safe than it used to be, less desirable to invest. So I definitely think the market, all of that will feed through into a tougher property market. I think it remains subdued for the second half of this year at least. Green shoots, there are some signs. I mean, rates are falling, albeit slowly, in the face of stubbornly high inflation. Prices are dropping, especially in central London. And I think employment's staying fairly steady. Employment rates unemployment hasn't risen too much. So there will be an inflection point where people, international buyers especially, want to jump back into London. And the local economy or local buyers will do the same. I just don't see that happening for at least 6 months, maybe a year.
Ben, you and I were involved in agency some years back when the trend, especially on new build, was to rely on the Asia Pacific area to bring us the customers. Yeah. So you'd hurtle out to KL, Singapore, Hong Kong in a sort of round trip and see what you could do. Is that market still there?
Not so much. I think it's very niche. It depends on which part of the world. But if you look at Hong Kong, for example, that was Hong Kong Chinese and expats living out there were big buyers of London. They've had their own issues in recent years, which has stemmed capital flows. So I would say Asia, Southeast Asia, less so. Mainland China were big buyers of London, but they've got issues at home. So that's definitely tailed off. The Middle East, there's a lot of money there at the moment. There's a lot of wealth being generated, but they're tending to keep it at home. That's not to say they don't want to invest in London. They're just sort of watching and waiting on the sidelines and seeing how our politics, our economics play out.
But the messages I hear from the Middle East especially are that they're not considering London to be crime-wise a very safe place at the moment and not very attractive. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's a perception. I think it of course it's based on truth. There's a danger that it gets over-egged. I mean, look, I live in London. I walk around the streets every day. I personally don't feel that. But there's no doubt that crime rates have gone up. The police has been underinvested in for years, and I think it's a concern for people. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. A very good comprehensive answer. Ben, on to your question. I'm considering making alterations to my London townhouse, which has a joined property either side. I've been advised that I must conform to the conditions of the Party Wall Act and would appreciate specific advice on what the implications of this act are, and do I need to appoint a particular type of surveyor to supervise? Now, I have to say, Ben, that I think the Party Wall Act is not something that the general public are terribly familiar with, so perhaps you'd just like to spend a minute giving us a brief outline of what the Party Wall Act is and what it represents.
Yes, so the Party Wall Act is a piece of legislation whereby if you are doing alterations or certain types of work to your property, you need to notify your neighbour potentially. So the type of alterations would typically be if you were to get an extension, dig down for a basement, a loft extension, removal of chimney breast. It's called the Party Wall Etc. Act. So essentially it starts off with any work to the party wall, i.e. a shared wall. So when we're talking about a townhouse, it's going to have a shared wall with neighbours on either side. And then the etc. is a little bit on the lazy side, but then it's supposed to encompass quite a lot of work. So that could be building a new wall at a boundary. It could also be excavating, so digging for foundations. So it's got nothing to do with a shared wall. So there's a lot of work, different types of work that can trigger the Party Wall Act.
So in essence, it's protecting the integrity of the construction next door, isn't it?
Yes, so it's giving you rights that you might not otherwise have under common law. It's quite an intrusive piece of legislation. For example, you can cut projections from a neighbour's wall. You can insert flashing into a neighbour's wall, and it's their wall on their land. So there's certain things that you can do that are very intrusive, that go above and beyond what you get in common law. You have access rights onto a neighbour's land to facilitate the build. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that the Party Wall Act does. It gives the building owner, the person doing the work, lots of benefits, but at the same time it's designed to ensure that the building owner doesn't push it too far, and that we have due regard to the adjoining owner, who is the neighbour affected by the works. So for example, we would look to minimise damage and inconvenience by potentially having a document in place called a Party Wall Award, which specifies the conditions by which the work can take place. It's understandable that a lot of people don't they've never heard of the Party Wall Act. I hadn't heard of the Party Wall Act before I became a Party Wall surveyor. So it's, you know, I didn't know about it, and lots of people don't.
No.
So that's no excuse for not understanding your obligations, but I do have some sympathy with the fact that it's not very widely well known. So it leads to a lot of friction and disputes, and the Party Wall itself, the Party Wall Act, is all about dispute resolution.
Okay, so coming to the sort of implication of the question really is, do I need to appoint a surveyor? So it sounds from your answer that the sensible answer would be yes, you do need to appoint a surveyor.
So to start off with, speak with a surveyor, give them the drawings to assess whether or not the proposals are going to invoke the Party Wall Act. So just take that advice. It's normally for free, nice and quick, and a surveyor will say, yes, look, I can see from your drawings that you're invoking the Party Wall Act here, and therefore you need to serve a notice. The point at which you should appoint a surveyor is if a dispute comes about. So you don't really appoint a surveyor before a dispute. You want to keep your options open. So to start off with, the surveyor is an agent, merely giving you advice. They can serve notice for you, but you don't necessarily want to sign a letter of appointment too quickly, or you're tied to that surveyor. You want flexibility.
Sure. Okay. Now, coming to the neighbour that you might be affecting, once they see that you've appointed a surveyor and they've had a notice of what they're going to do, etc., have they got to appoint a surveyor? Because I can see the neighbours resisting, because that's going to involve them in cost, isn't it?
So the neighbour would have different ways of responding. They can simply consent to everything, which means that the work goes ahead. They're not consenting to any damage. They can always raise a dispute formally if they need to, but they're just saying, look, as it stands, the work can go ahead. Sometimes they can consent with a a schedule of condition undertaken of their property, which is a report that documents the condition of their property before the works start. So that can be a helpful way of handling matters. Or they dissent and they want a party wall award, which is where they would have a surveyor appointed on their behalf. Either they choose their own surveyor, or the two parties can agree to have a shared surveyor, which would just ensure that the costs are halved and it's dealt with proportionately. So it's there's various ways, various outcomes.
But I suppose, just coming back to the point that I made, it seems a little bit unfair that if my neighbour's going to do works, that it's actually going to cost me money.
It shouldn't cost you any money at all. Most of the time, if you appoint a surveyor to act on your behalf, the person doing the work will pay for that surveyor. By and large, the first option to be explored should be the agreed surveyor, where you're going to share a surveyor, because I think that that's the safest way of proceeding in terms of there's not any known party wall appeals. I think out of something like 68 appeals since 2002, every appeal related to 2 surveyor awards as opposed to having the one agreed surveyor. So I think where possible, people should consider sharing a surveyor to have this dispute settled, an impartial surveyor who will settle that dispute.
Are the party wall surveyors member of the RICS as other surveyors are?
Anyone can be a surveyor. You can. We can all be party wall surveyors. It just needs to be a person.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for that. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break, when I'll be asking both our Bens even more questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. Ben, your second question. Taking on a rental property in recent times can prove to be as expensive as buying, given the huge surge in rental costs. Should the government intervene in the market and do more to make the purchase of homes more affordable for younger buyers?
The answer is yes, but it's very nuanced. The area that I think is the most risky is stimulating buy-side demand. So in the past, government's come up with various schemes. Arguably the most famous is Help to Buy, which I think was not good.
Why do you think it wasn't good?
It created a 2-tier market. So it created a bubble in new build property, but it didn't apply to secondary market. It let people buy with a 5% deposit, which on the face of it's great, but now most of them are negative equity. It was an opportunity for the big national house builders to charge within reason what they wanted and get it, because people had nowhere else to go. So they paid very full prices with very little margin in terms of deposit, and it just made a lot of house builders very rich, I think. So that's not necessarily the answer. I think shared equity is interesting, giving people some kind of ability to buy more of a property as they earn more. That seems more fair and equitable, but I think the Help to Buy type model should be avoided. I think the real problem lies on the supply side, not the demand side, because if you artificially try and prop up demand, with properties already fairly unaffordable for the average person in the UK, it's not going to help. So really what you need to do is unlock supply. So that's government land bank, that's reforming the planning system, which we've been talking about for years and hasn't happened. So it's a big if. It's supporting small to medium-sized developers to help unlock land to work alongside bigger ones. It's public-private partnerships, and it's reskilling and training young people to get into construction and bolster the workforce to deliver the homes. So there's loads of different parts to delivering that supply, I think.
Are the government going to hit this 1.5 million target?
Not a chance.
I don't think they're going to get anywhere near, do you?
No, I mean, if and once again, I'm at risk of banging the same old drum. I'm London centric, but I think the last stats were we needed something like 85 or 90,000 new home starts this year, and at last count we were at about 4,500. So like 95% down on where it needs to be. So yeah, so it's not looking great, and I think
I have to say, I tend to agree with you. I do worry about government intervention into markets, because too often they sort of demonise one part of the market structure. And for a market to work, it has to work from top to bottom. It's no good having people moving up the ladder if there's nowhere to move to, and there's no way of people being able to move down the ladder again if there's no product to to buy. So it has to work right the way through, and the government tend to just pick on certain areas to sort of either encourage or discourage. I'm surprised at the new Rental Act if it comes in full, because again you're going to go back to a situation where virtually secure tenancies are created, which is what of course Margaret Thatcher freed up with the assured short-hold tenancies, wasn't it, you know, and got rid of the Rackmans of this world. But we can quite easily go back to that. Demonising the smaller buy-to-let landlord is not a good idea. They've, I think, provided a great service to the market by putting product on the market. I know part of the argument is, well, people would love to be able to include their investments in the pension, and you can't do that. But there's no reason why you can't have a property and simply supplement your pension with the income. But the government seemed to have drawn a line over that by increasing the taxation and making life more difficult. And I think putting the whole industry in the hands of institutional landlords, I'm not sure is such a bright idea.
I think it's a good point, because also I was talking about how you free up or how you encourage more people to buy, but actually not everyone wants to buy, and buying isn't right for everyone. So the rental side of the equation is equally important. I think the government has to adopt a balanced approach where they very selective stimulus on the buy side, definitely helping free up supply, but also building more or freeing up more rental properties. And yeah, the institutional side is in full flow, and that's happening right now. But private landlords are being beaten around the head with a baseball bat. I happen to think the Renters' Rights Bill has some good parts. I think the problem is it's a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to the entire country and all rental stock. But it's not a bad thing. Letting people enjoy a home they're renting for a decent period of time seems fair to me. They have a right to paying rent.
But Ben, that's quite easy, isn't it? You know, well, you've heard me say it many times when we've worked together in the past. You know, if somebody signs a contract, landlord has drawn it up, so he obviously likes it. The tenant's read it, looked at it, obviously likes it. So why don't people just do what that tenancy agreement says? So if it says you're there for an unlimited amount of time, that then suits a landlord who's got proper funding, can afford to fund his property with the mortgage for however long, not run into trouble halfway through and need the property back. Or you could have a landlord structure where, you know, it is 6 or 12 months, and again the tenant looks at it, they're signing an agreement for 6 months or 12 months, well, that's what it is. You know, I think we could simplify the matters a lot more easily than we do. Ben, your question, what are some of the most common mistakes that homeowners make or matters that they overlook when planning extensions to their properties?
They often overlook the existence of the Party Wall Act. So it's...
But as you said, it's Party Wall Act, etc.
Exactly, yeah. So a lot of people might think, for example, that we're a detached house. We're just doing stuff to our own property on our own land, and that's it. You know, they've got no issues. They're just building up to the boundary, perhaps, and they just think it's on our own land, like it's no one else's business. So it's understandable that sometimes, or quite often, in fact, the Party Wall Act is overlooked. The whole existence is overlooked. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that, let's say that they've engaged with a party wall surveyor who says, look, you do need to invoke the Party Wall Act by serving a notice, you know, whether it's detached, semi-detached, or just building on your own land in a, you know, detached property. Various things do invoke the Party Wall Act. So, you know, if in doubt, just simply ask a party wall surveyor and they will tell you pretty quickly. But the next thing that people will overlook is how long it takes. And we don't know, which is not very good for people wanting to start, you know, say next week or in a few weeks. That it's to serve a notice, you're really saying that you're going to start work in a month or 2 months, depending on the notice. It gets a bit complicated, but you know, you serve your notice and then you're waiting for the neighbour to respond. Then you don't know how they're going to respond, because if they don't consent, then already now this is going to add time. So they might dissent and appoint a surveyor. Sometimes you don't know how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take. So people overlook by overlooking the whole party wall process, even if they're aware of it, there can be a sense of almost blissful ignorance, because they just think, well, it's the neighbour, they're just going to consent, it will be okay, we get on fine. And then all of a sudden they've dissented, and then, you know, 5 or 10 grand later and several months down the line, when you've got the paperwork in place, this is all something that was unpredictable to the person doing the work. So there's so many things that are overlooked, and then also other things can go wrong in terms of who is appointed to act on your behalf. So you want a good party wall surveyor to guide you through the process, to handle the various eventualities. Ideally, that party wall surveyor shouldn't really be too close to the design team, if that makes sense, or like the architect or something like that, because to have a team around you, what you really want is a professional that sort of steps back, that can then come in and say, look, these drawings, we might need to adjust a little bit, or, you know, we need to look at the methodology of the build. And so it helps to have that outside person who can talk a little bit more freely, perhaps. So, you know, there's so many things that people are overlooking when it comes to the Party Wall Act.
Okay, I think you mentioned two very good points there. I mean, one of the subjects we often get in here is about investment and about developing and all the rest of it. And the one factor people always forget is time. They forget that if something takes an inordinate amount of time, it costs money. And again, with your neighbour situation, what might have been a 3-month or 4-month project can very easily go 6-7 months. And if you've got that going on next door to you, it's not the funniest thing in the world. And your other point about, well, I'm a detached property, I'm, you know, nothing to do with my neighbours. Again, we've had in London many cases where people have got a detached house, they've perhaps wanted to put a swimming pool in the basement. That affects foundation integrity, and then does actually go on to next door and cause a problem. So it's quite a complicated area, isn't it?
It is complicated. I would say, though, that it doesn't need to be complicated if you're just asking the right person to guide you through it. So that's the key there. I would say anyone doing any work in general should just have a quick check to see whether or not the Party Wall Act applies, and then they should be satisfied that the surveyor acting on their behalf is competent. You know, perhaps ask how many projects they might have done in the last 6 months. Like, as a bit of a guide, I do about 30 projects a month. So, you know, you want someone that's well tuned in with the Party Wall Act, not just doing 2 or 3 projects a year. You want someone that's going to be giving very, like, sort of top-notch specific advice, and quickly able to tell you, you know, what the situation is and how long this can take. Although it is tough, because there are variables out there that you simply cannot control, i.e. how is the neighbour going to respond?
Okay, well, I'm going to say a big thank you to Ben Stroud, co-founder of Grange London Estate Agents. Thank you, Ben, for coming in. And to Ben Mackie, founder of the Party Wall Collective. Thank you, Ben, for coming in.
Thank you.
Great answers to the questions. Thank you. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.